Well, good morning, everybody. Premature heart activity. Wrong camera for the heart. Come on, let's do it again. Let's do it again. You're looking live into an office on a lonely Saturday morning here in Ellensburg, Washington, USA. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Nick Zentner. The local time is 7:47 a.m. Pacific time, and today's date is Saturday, February 15th of 2025. And it just occurred to me, like 3 minutes ago, that today was originally supposed to be the end of the alphabet. When we started this in early November, February 15th, the day after Valentine's Day, I remember saying that, was going to be the grand finale of the series. But we had an interruption for a month, if you recall, and so we still have a few letters left due to that unplanned interruption. So glad to be with you today. Looks like we're loud and clear. Adele is in New Zealand, Auckland, New Zealand. Adele, hello. Where are you viewing from? Can I say hi to a number of you before we begin the program today? There's the guy in Norway who says, thanks for the hard work on these videos. Or gal, thank you. Scrolling very fast, let me go back, grab a bunch of you here. Malmo, Sweden, that's Philippe. Or Philip, Las Vegas, Nevada. East Vancouver, Washington. Yorkshire, UK, hello Ruth. Northeast USA, okay, Queen, what did you do? You don't want us to know your location? Google Earth by Glenn. Good morning, Glenn, from Liberty Lake, Washington. Greg's in Lodgepole, Alberta. Pearland, Texas. Darrington, Washington. That's Kurt of Darrington. Lottie the Roddy. Good morning, Professor Zentner. Spoken by school children in unison. Very good, Tom. Thank you. Jim is in Chehalis. Bob is in Riverton, Illinois. Janet is in Penticton, BC, Canada. Mike is in Olympia, Washington. I'm feeling good this morning. We'll see how long it lasts. Kurt is in Coos Bay, Oregon. I just texted Jordan Carey some inappropriate photos from the hallway, so I'm extra jazzed up. Where was that? Cambodia. What? There was a flag in here somewhere. Bo is in Cambodia. Hello, Bo. Yeah, Southeast Asia. I understand the time difference, but beyond that, I don't understand why we don't have a ton of viewers from Southeast Asia. It's always been a mystery to me. Jim is from beautiful frozen Lake Kashkonot, Wisconsin. Hello, Jim. Red Deer, Alberta. Yosemite, California. Gabriella says, good morning from a cold France. Of course, I'm drawn to these flags. I love the flags. So international. Down to live. Paul says, hello all from Two Creeks, Wisconsin. Oh, Two Creeks. Oh, up there at north on Lake Superior, I think. Yeah, okay. No, Lake Michigan, huh? Two Creeks? Two harbors? What the, huh? Kielbasa? Charlie Murphy's cooking Johnsonville brats. Johnsonville brats. Johnsonville brats. Advertisement circa 1978 from Wisconsin, watching the Packers. Oh boy, Alex says it is minus 17 degrees Fahrenheit in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. You hang in there, Alec. It's 25 degrees Fahrenheit here. We'll see if this is a frozen camera or not, but we have sun. More snow is on the way, not a whole lot, but it is definitely minus, not minus whatever you said. So hang in there, hang in there, hang in there. Alan is from Yakima, Washington. Elko, Nevada. Bill says, good morning from Newport, Washington, where it's snowing. That's extreme northeastern Washington. Gary Paul is from just outside Darrington this morning. That means Gary's home at his cabin, and I think we're going to start with a repeat of your video clip from your cabin, Gary. Nice to have you with us today. Rachel says, good morning, Gary Paul. Geology Grandma says it's 76 degrees in Orlando, Florida. Wah, wah. Nice job. Anna's in Finland. Okay, now everybody's putting their flags in. I love this. Yeah, you want to punch in? If you're watching from outside of the United States, or I guess if you want to put an American flag in, fine. Let's just do some flag stuff. Pat, the pilot, is from Natchez, American flag. Gabriella, oh Lord. Gabriella is an Italian living in France with a British boyfriend. No big deal. So she's got 3 flags. I love it. Say hi to your boyfriend for me, even though he's British. Just kidding. And it's like, how do I do a flag thing? Yeah, good question. I would have the same problem. Now Pat's showing off. Uh-oh. Am I frozen? What happened there? Are we good? I have an excellent connection, don't I? Okay. So this is fun. Never thought about doing this. That's what we'll do for the next 5 minutes. Perry, if you're watching this in replay, blah, 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 start it in 10 minutes. Okay. Perry has an Indonesian flag where it's 79 degrees. Maybe that's Fahrenheit. Maybe that's, no, it's not Celsius. It's Fahrenheit. And it's almost midnight. Perry, thank you for your dedication. Play now, work later. I'm loving this. This is like the Olympics now. The Parade of Nations. Hello from Whitehorse, Yukon in Canada. Minus 20 degrees Celsius, Canadian flag. I think I showed your picture, didn't I? With the parka and the hood. It's nice to put a name with the face. Is that what you say? My flag is the Earth. Okay, Lindsay, very good. Bernadette, the Philippines. American flag. Heinrich is in Bow, Washington. American flag and Swedish flag. Heinrich, are you married to Denise? Bronze chapter? Nice. Scrolling back looking for flags. Now, David's got a pirate flag. Love this. Ana Rita Martino is a good day in Portugal. I believe that's the Portugal flag. I know your name, so I know you're in Portugal. I'm just going back now. This is too much fun. Philippines. I'm too far back. Nobody's got a flag. Oh, Cambodia flag's what got me going on this. And Kalamazoo, Gary's got his own flag. Just kidding. Oh, we got more. Richard is in Austria. There's the Austrian flag. I love these flags. Pat Miller has raised the white flag. He surrenders. He's in Yakima. Yuki, Japan, and America. Nice. John is in Slanina. Is that a made-up flag? It must be, John. Can't even really see that. All right. Fun. Thanks again to Don from Erie, Pennsylvania for the gift. I'm wearing the brown shirt again, but we're transitioning from brown to purple. I don't have a purple shirt. No, I don't. Please don't send me any more gifts. But seriously, I don't have. Gary's in, Larry is in Radevormwald, Germany. Larry? Radevormwald. Hello, Larry. Thank you for joining us. A text's coming in. This is probably from Hannah Shamloo. And it is. Very good. Thank you all for joining us. Yes, if you're waiting for the program to begin and you are new here for some reason, we're starting in 5 minutes. Come on, man. We're starting in 5 minutes. Thank you for joining us. Hot mic. Hot mic. Okay, time to get serious. What are you doing? You have a lot. Don't screw around too much. You don't want to run out of time today. You can't have today spill into next show. That would be a mistake, I think. So, Scott wants me to sing to the Royal Purple. No singing today, Scott. I only sang in one show so far. I think that's enough. Okay, don't look at Scott's comment. Let's go. Rain shadow. You're going to start with rain shadow. Verbal rain shadow, maybe the video clip, but probably just verbal rain shadow, high cascade. Start with that. And then go to the slides. Keep it really brisk. Extra brisk. Keep the energy up. All right, go take a walk. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to the program. Today's episode is entitled Cascades Uplift. I didn't even erase the board from last time because, we're going to continue with Brown We're going to continue with the flood basalts invading the low Cascades of southern Washington. But we will transition today from brown to purple. We'll transition today from the teens, where we have the flood basalts. That's brown. You know the color scheme. Do I know the color scheme? Of course I do. We've stuck with it. We've flirted with divorce, but we've stuck with the color scheme the whole way. So we're transitioning from here to here. And the Cascade Uplift, which I promised to get to today, that's purple time. But are we uplifting? Are we pressing a button and getting the high Cascades and not the low Cascades? Are we uplifting the Cascades from low to high 10 million years ago? Is that when you want to hit the button? 7 million years ago, hit the button? 4, 3 million years ago? It depends on who you talk to. And we will be listening to a number of geologists who've been thinking about this off and on over the years. We'll look at a little bit of the evidence, but we're not going to have one number. So if you're looking to gather some facts to tell your friends at coffee tomorrow morning about what you learned here this morning, great. I'm glad you're talking about geology, but we're not going to have one simple number to start the high Cascades. Even more frustrating, if you want to think about it that way, why? Why are we suddenly lifting the Cascades at some point? Why are we pressing the button? Is there a tectonic answer? Is there some sort of magma flux story that explains why we're going from low Cascades to high Cascades? Are we even sure we have the high Cascades today? Well, let's start with that. Have you heard of something called a rain shadow effect? Where you have moisture coming in off of an ocean, and you have a bunch of weather on the ocean side of the mountain range, but on the back side of the mountain range, away from the ocean, it's very different. There's hardly any precipitation compared to the ocean side of the range. I'm talking about the Cascades now, the rain shadow effect. And if you're familiar with Washington, I think of my mother when I say that. You know, my mom's still back in Wisconsin, and sometimes she'll see somebody at the store, even now, and they'll go, how's Nick doing? Haven't seen him in years. She's like, oh, he's out in Washington State. He's out in the state of Washington. She always says it that way because people go, oh, Washington, D.C.? It's like, no, the state. And then they go, oh, Seattle. Does Nick like Seattle? They immediately go to that. And they have an image of Seattle and all the wonderful forests and the lakes and the Seattle Seahawks and all that. And even if I see somebody in Wisconsin in the grocery store with my mom and we're in the dairy aisle, of course it's the dairy aisle, it's Wisconsin, they go, oh, Nick, how's it going out there in the state of Washington, right, Mary? It's like, state of Washington. Then they start asking what lake do we live on, and I teach at a college just like my parents. My parents were teachers and you're teachers, But they imagine it's Seattle, and I don't correct them and say, actually, I live in eastern Washington where it's a frickin' desert and there's sagebrush and rattlesnakes. If I get to that point with somebody, they're like disappointed. Like, what happened? Did you break some law and they sent you to some penitentiary in eastern Washington? No, I chose to go to the desert. Why? Oh, and then it goes on and on. So there is a fundamental difference between eastern Washington and western Washington. Climate-wise, political climate-wise, culture-wise, everything. And if you come out here and see it, I think you'll be impressed at how much precipitation there is in western Washington compared to eastern Washington. And the high Cascades is the difference. We did not have a rain shadow effect when the Cascades were low. So it's all tied together. Pressing the button, jacking up the Cascades to their present high position, developing a rain shadow effect. When and why is that happening? That's ultimately where we're going today. But tied into that, baked into that, is our brown question about did the flood basalts long ago, 16 million years ago, cross these low Cascades? Okay, I have so much for you, and I want to make sure to finish today that I'm going to just try to keep the pace going as best I can. He goes to CircleCam. He goes to the website, even though it's not Third Person Thursday. We don't have to go to any of these places. We're going right to the Cascades. And yes, I've reshuffled, as I promised. I took some of the V papers and put them up to W. This is W today. So many of these papers waiting for you are a combination of new and old papers with figures, with text, and they give all sorts of background and detail on this question about Cascades Uplift. We're pretty much not going there with all the detail today. And as I mentioned in the last show, it's an executive decision that I'm not doing the Ellensburg Formation because there's a lot of great detail that I've always wanted to learn within the Ellensburg Formation. Those are the sedimentary packages between brown lava flows. I'm saving that for Geology 351. I'm even more in love with that decision now that I've thought about it for a couple of days. So there are some Ellensburg Formation papers for today's episode and the last episode, but we're not using them. I'm going to use them this spring with Geology 351. Okay, so there's a lot of papers. Fine. There is a rain shadow. Let's watch a little bit of it, I guess. Let me skip to the Washington part of it. I made this with Tom Foster when we visited Hawaii and stayed at Steve Lundblad's house. 2-minute Here in the Pacific Northwest, we've got the same effect. Western Washington is famous for its rain, but there's a strikingly different landscape on the other side of the Cascades. Washington's the evergreen state, but half of it's everbrown. Okay, you want a rain shadow effect? You need 3 essential items: an ocean nearby, winds blowing steadily onshore, and a mountain range to block the traveling air mass. Here's how it works. Evaporation on the surface of the ocean creates moist air. Prevailing winds push the wet air inland until it hits the base of the mountains. The air is forced to rise, and as the air lifts, it expands and cools. Cooler air can't hold as much moisture, so clouds form, and it rains a bunch, resulting in a lush green landscape. The now dry air mass crosses the mountains and begins to sink on the leeward side of the range. It compresses and warms, promoting evaporation. Dry air warms 1 degree Celsius per 100 meters of elevation drop. Some of the driest places around the world exist because of the rain shadow effect. There's a rain shadow north of the Himalayas in Asia, a rain shadow west of the Great Dividing Range in Australia, a rain shadow east of the Sierra Nevada mountain range in California, and that rain shadow southwest of Mauna Kea on the Big Island of Hawaii. And here in the Pacific Northwest, we actually have 2 rain shadows. In winter months at higher elevations, it's not rain. Up here in the Cascades, annual snowfall is measured in tens of feet. The soaking rains on the wet side and deep mountain snows have helped shape our landscape. Sharp mountain peaks carved by glaciers and huge landslides in the lowlands, like the tragic 2014 Oso slide. Okay. Tom Foster, rest in peace. That was done more than 10 years ago. We now have the concept of a rain shadow effect. Wonderful. Keep it going. Keep it going. There's a lot here. Yeah, I'm in a good mood. You know why? Basically, the car is idling out in the parking lot. I'm heading up and over the Cascades. As soon as I'm done with you, going to Bellingham, visiting family. Liz is already over there. She couldn't wait. The plan was she was supposed to join me today after the live stream. She's like, Friday at 1 o'clock, she's like, I'm going. I can't wait. I got to see that baby. Okay? So I'm going to see the rain shadow effect. I'll be taking measurements the whole way. No, I won't. Come on, man. Let's get into today's episode. We start with a clip that you've already seen, but I want to show it again because I think it's important to realize that we have stumbled into this question organically through the whole series. You want proof? Let's talk to Gary Paul. Thank you for that. Final thoughts, comments, or reflections on the alphabet and what you're hoping that we will do before we quit at the end of the month.
Wow. Well, probably for me, one of the big ahas that has come out of this was how long a period of time were the Cascades basically near or at sea level.
Yeah.
It's like, wow.
Thank you.
All that green stuff that you drive by over by Lake Ketchelis, the Natchez. Also now that's up, at almost 8,000 feet in the Alpine Lakes and scattered around all over. Those are big for me, I think, to realize the extent of those in the Cascades.
Okay, well, that got me going. That got me going on this whole jag, the last couple of letters. Thanks again, Gary, for that. So the one and only Gary Paul photo today is one we focused on last time as well, asking ourselves, why do we have such an abrupt margin, an abrupt western margin of the flood basalts, and specifically the Grand Ronde flows? And you're like, those don't look low. Well, no, they're high. They're high today, but they were low at the time of these flood eruptions, these flood basalt eruptions. Flat, okay? Half review, half new thoughts for today. Once upon a time, 16 million years ago, the Grand Ronde lavas, just north of Ellensburg, Washington, flowed into the picture, flowed into the frame from the east, from the right. Did they stop right here? I don't think so. There's 2,000 feet of this stuff, and the elevation of Lion Rock here up on Table Mountain is more than 6,000 feet elevation. So this is peculiar and has always been peculiar for me and for many. It's not just this photo that I just showed you, but that dramatic boundary of Grand Ronde lavas, 16 million years old, abruptly stopping along this margin. That's a thing. It's not just one place. Mission Ridge, Divide Ridge, Bethel Ridge, all these are ridges. All these are precipitous drops on the western margin. We're going to really lean into that again today, but even more. But back when the German chocolate cake was flat, we've got our bunch of layers. I showed you this last time, Tom Foster once again. These lava flows are everywhere in the rain shadow, in eastern Washington and eastern Oregon, eastern Washington and eastern Oregon. Reviewing a little bit from last time. This is part 2. If you missed the last episode, you're starting cold with us. Now, orange, is this orange time? Is this swak? No. It's orange because the lava's hot. Okay, man, come on. Play along. And those orange floods of maple syrup making the German chocolate cake, if you follow, the source of those are fissures, are deep cracks that have been mapped beautifully in eastern Washington, eastern Oregon, even into Idaho. Damn near Idaho. Now, let's slow down just a touch. These are the new Princeton dates. Jennifer Kasbaum, Blair, Shane, Mike Eddy, that sort of thing. The old dates are in blue. These are the new dates. USGS people, get with the times. Upgrade your... There we go. Grand Ronde are the featured lavas. They're unusually thick. They make up almost 3/4 of the entire German cake. And chemically, they're different. I don't know how significant this is necessarily, but it's been beaten into me by Andy Miner and a few other local geologists that the silica content in these monster Grand Ronde flows are a little bit higher than the basalts that erupted after and before the Grand Ronde flows. Be that as may, let's move on. So if we go back and look at these early flows, that's not a Cascade crossing story. Those Steens and Naha flows are erupting locally, and they're filling low spots. But it's when we have the Grand Ronde flows that we have such incredible volumes of each individual flow that we are easily approaching the Cascades, at least, going through a low that existed in the Cascades, at least. And yes, some of that lava reaches the Oregon coast. We looked at an Oregon Public Broadcasting video last time. Some of that Grand Ronde lava is making it to Grays Harbor, Chehalis, Kurt Cobain country. Okay? This is conventional talk. And then if we get up to these younger flows after the main event, this is literally the main event. After the main event, we have some piddly flows, the ginkgo that was actually getting to the coast, the ginkgo flow that did actually get to the mouth of the Columbia, but gone are the days of having so much volume in ginkgo time and even younger than this that we get across the Cascades potentially. Okay, so it's really just the central part, the main event of the German chocolate cake that we're dwelling on again today. Yeah, we're up here. No, we're not talking much about this. Yeah, today is this and then moving into this. And I'm picking 7, but we'll realize that 7 is not everybody's number. Very good. If we go way back earlier than 7, you're sick of this by now. I think I am too. We're at or close to sea level, Ohanapakash time, low Cascades. We're at or we're at or close to sea level for some during red time, but we can go ahead and put in some dominant stratovolcanoes as long as it's still a mostly low Cascades. That's the way I'm thinking of this currently. And so please realize, I'm jacked up now, okay? I hope you're feeling the energy. Please realize that I'm not insisting today as a teacher to have this completely flat, beveled off, low Cascades completely. We can have, and I think we do have, from the work of Don Swanson and Paul Hammond in the South Cascades, we can have some major stratovolcanoes that existed for a while and then eroded away. That's fine. But there's a lot of space in between these stratovolcanoes, and so the idea of crossing through the Cascades is still a thing. And I don't know if we want to give up totally on worms of orange lava versus an orange blanket, where even if there's Cascades, volcanoes, stratovolcanoes that are standing, maybe even we overwhelm them. I don't think that's off the table. Here, we looked at this briefly last time, a Paul Hammond map, are 2 of the dominant stratovolcanoes that were standing at least back then in red time. Were they still truly towering and standing 10 million years later when the brown lavas came in? I don't know. But we have this relationship. Good. We can still have some standing cones, but it's still a low Cascades. Everybody's saying that. Everybody in geology, the most conservative and the most radical, are all saying there are no high Cascades. There are 0 high Cascades. There's 0 rain shadow during the time of the brown lavas. That's a major message from today if you didn't catch it last time. The high Cascades have to be younger than the Grand Ronde lavas. Okay, so then we get into the crossing business, and it's the Grand Ronde, not all the CRBs, not all the flood basalts, not all the Yakima basalts, but it's the Grand Ronde time right in here that we're potentially crossing previously unrecognized areas of the Cascades. Okay, I think I want to do it. I'm going to draw a little bit. We go to Docky, and we know we just have 3 letters left after today. Here we are. Hope you had a nice Valentine's Day. Purple, purple, purple. We know the routine by now. Good. Oh, I forgot to get some paper going. Let's do this. Let's just do this. So I want to do this as quickly as possible. You can tell, right? I'm being very, very quick. East and west. Come on. What the F? What's happening? Autofocus. Low Cascades. If you ask J. Hoover Mackin or Bates McKee or Eric Cheney, who's still with us, they are all University of Washington. I should use purple because those are the school colors. University of Washington. They're Huskies, everybody. And those Huskies, back in the post-World War II time, and Eric Cheney is still, even though he's in old age now, still talking about this, the idea at the maximum level of the concept is that we have a total overwhelming of the low Cascades by the Grand Ronde lavas. There was a complete blanket. And that's appealing. That's appealing on a kind of a cartoonish major level. A complete inundation of the low Cascades, because we don't have the high Cascades yet. It's 16 million years ago. And then the idea is, then if you start uplifting sometime during purple time, and you start to jack these mountains up, and you get them up to a high level to create the rain shadow, okay, well, let's draw that very quickly, please. In other words, we've uplifted the low, almost non-existent Cascades to a topographic high where we do have less than 10 inches of rain on the east side of the Cascades in the Pacific Northwest and way more precipitation on the west side. That's fine. But the question is, what happened to this thick pile of brown lavas? And the answer is, they're gone. Geology 101 students, uplift intensifies erosion. If you tectonically or somehow otherwise uplift an area in a radical way, in a major way, as you uplift that rock, you're going to intensify the erosional agents, rivers, glaciers, but mostly rivers. The rivers are just going to chew harder to fight against this uplifting piece of your region. You're going to chew away. You're going to erode the top layers first. Some of you hated my ugly Russell Ranch story, but I thought it was brilliant because I was talking about uplifting the basement. And as we uplift the basement, we get rid of so many of the overlying layers. In this particular case, as we start uplifting this, our Columbia River basalt lavas are going to go bye-bye. They're literally going to be removed. And so you say, what evidence do you have? What evidence do you have for this? I'm a skeptic. I'm just trying to use common sense. What evidence do you have for this? Because when I go to the Cascades today, there's nothing there. You're right. There's nothing there. We're going to see a couple little scraps that are poorly understood until today. They've been lost to time, but we're going to find them today. But the main message is we can think about the concept, can't we? We can think about the concept even though there's nothing left, more or less, in the high Cascades today. And you're like, okay, well, is this really a thing? Yes. Yes. Get rid of your question mark. It's there. Gary Paul took a photo for you. There's all sorts of work done on the east slopes with the remnants of these flood basalts. But is this still here? And the answer is no. At least with our current understanding of Puget Lowland, of the Willamette Valley, there are no obvious places where there's Columbia River basalt lava that's the matching bridge that used to be connected. This is like a drawbridge. Oh, interesting. This is like a drawbridge. This is like you could drive across the drawbridge before it gets lifted up. My grandma used to live in Duluth, Minnesota. As a kid, I was always fascinated by that. I was always a nervous kid. Like, are we going to get across before the lights go off, Grandma? She's like, it's fine. I spent my whole life in Duluth, Minnesota, little Nicky. It's okay. But when the ship decides it needs to get underneath the bridge, the red light goes on, we lift the drawbridge in Duluth, Minnesota, and we lose the connection. We can't drive anymore. Is there the other side of the bridge in western Washington? It might be in the subsurface. It might be underneath all those glacial till deposits and glacial outwash deposits. It might be down there. But I've poked around enough with geologists currently, and nobody's got any hint of it, any sniff of it. Okay. Blanket or worms, I'm simply saying, did we have a continuous blanket of basalt over the low Cascades, or can we downgrade our greediness and simply just imagine some sort of connection of east to west with Grand Ronde flows worming their way through the Cascades, through old river valleys, and not a dominant blanket. Okay, move on. So this is Mackin, who was selling this story, and I don't know how much field work he did, but he was a teacher and a well-respected researcher with stratigraphy and other things, and we're really spreading the gospel of J. Hoover Mackin here this morning. Do I want to read Mackin? I don't know. I guess not. I want to keep this going, but I can make sure that you remember that you have this. You have a digital copy of this, and this is Mackin talking about uplifting a telephone book. There's all sorts of great stuff in here. Maybe we'll read it later. Maybe we'll read it towards the end if I have time, but I don't think I will. I'm trying to keep this brisk. Orange blanket. How much more orange, once upon a time, covered what is now the High Cascades, what is now Seattle, what is now the Olympic Peninsula? I don't know the timing of this either. If we're really greedy, we've got orange lava covering this entire area and getting all the way to Vancouver Island. That's going a bit far even for me, I think. Is it an orange blanket during Grand Ronde time? Or are there individual orange worms that are, why did you pick circles? Because I don't know how to draw a figure that has an orange worm. That's me. I'm 62. So are there connections where we can have old river valleys filled with lava, and can we connect places that have orange on both sides? Well, interestingly, we did have that last episode. There is no, did I do this here? I'll do it later. But this concept of connecting where we have CRBs today and CRBs today and no CRBs in between, somehow this is conventional orange gummy worm in the Newport, Oregon area by everybody. Why can't we do it with the Grand Ronde flows in Washington? He asks himself. So we go to this paper. Don Swanson is part of our story again today. I did a little bit of this last time, but I rushed through it. I don't want to rush through it now. So this is a very important paper, 1967, by Don Swanson, who had just finished his PhD work at Johns Hopkins under Aaron Waters, and now is a brand new employee of the USGS. 1,700 feet of Grand Ronde lava on the east slopes of the low Cascades, now the high Cascades, in the Yakima area. The local relief before the basalts was more than 1,700 feet. So thicknesses of each of the 15 Grand Ronde lava flows vary widely. I stumbled on that last time. You can trace these flows for miles. For example, at the Titan volcano, which I just documented for the first time, everybody. My name's Don Swanson. That Titan volcano still rose at least 1,600 feet above its base during the low Cascades time in the Windy Point area. And there's granite-like stuff, tonalite, that formed a step-toe at least 900 feet high between Blue Slide and Darling Mountain. Tonalite is a cousin of granite. It's a pluton. Hannah Shamloo, Daryl Gussie. Where's this pluton? Is this the pluton at Goat Rocks? Can we look for it and find it for the last three letters? Pre-tertiary tonalite, pluton, formed a step-toe at least 900 feet high back at Grand Ronde time between Blue Slide and Darling Mountain. And a hill of up to 800 feet high cut out the lower six flows and most of the seventh flow in the vicinity of jump-off. These hills were not part of a continuous chain, however, but instead rose from rather flat lowlands, ding, 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 which drained to the west and southwest, as discussed later in this paper. This is Don Swanson talking in the late 60s. The average flow thicknesses is 93 feet. These are Grand Ronde lavas, brown lavas, but this means little, since single flows and groups of flows vary considerably in thickness from place to place in direct correspondence with the underlying topography. The flows gradually lap out against older hills, and so on. These Flood basalt layers, lava flows, may once have extended beyond the present Cascade crest. However, since the crest owes its elevation to post-Yakima basalt uplift and volcanism, as does its better-known southern extension down in Oregon, the rugged western foothills, on the other hand, underwent substantial pre-Yakima deformation. And in Oregon, they were able to check the westward advancing flows of the Yakima basalt. All right, so Don, I'm realizing it right now, reading that with you. We hinted at this last episode. We're doing it again right now. Don Swanson likes a red uplift pre-Yakima basalt west of the crest of the Cascades. Where is that? But he wants that highland to be there. So Don Swanson is basically going to say by email in just a bit, recently, yeah, I think those Grand Ronde flows, those Yakima basalts got further west than they currently exist, but I don't think they crossed over to Seattle because this red uplift, this red highlands to the west of the crest stopped them. So here is a very simple map by Don Swanson, 1967. Here's the edge, a very sharp edge. I don't even, why does he have it dashed? It's such a solid thing you can follow. Most of this could be solid, Don. Come on. And this, just by nature, this western edge of the known Yakima basalts is so squirrely that we are dealing with a pre-Yakima basalt topography, it seems to me. Or maybe it's squirrely because of the Yakima folds that are younger, now that I think about it. This is weird and interesting that the western edge of the brown lavas have a finger pointing to Mount Adams. I almost said something else. Okay. Don Swanson, it seems likely that the brown lavas in the Tieton River area likely advanced across the site of the he just said that, only to lap out against. South of Mount Adams, however, the flows clearly advanced far to the west, possibly as far as the ocean, so that an east-west trending lowland must have been present somewhere near the site of present-day Columbia River. Okay, so I think Don Swanson is saying, I've thought about this, I've mapped this, I don't see an orange blanket at White Pass, but I do see an orange blanket further to the south. Well, that's not radical. We all know those orange lavas are getting through the Cascades to the south. Come on, Don. How far the flows extended west of their present border is conjectural. It is unlikely, however, that they spilled over the ancestral Cascade Range and buried southwest Washington because the Yakima basalt is uncommon west of the Washington Cascades. Uncommon? Some of it exists? I guess he does mean southwestern Washington. And that which is present can be related either to local eruptive centers or flows which moved westward through the Columbia Gorge. Okay, very good. Okay, so Don Swanson, thank you. This beautiful map lays the groundwork for our discussion today. Sky Cooley weighs in by email. Good stuff from Don as always. Random thoughts from Sky, always very interesting. The Yakima and Natchez rivers were flowing south and likely southeast by the mid-Miocene, that's the brown time, indicating a high to the west, if only a modest one. Thickening of Ellensburg interbeds to the west would imply a high existed. Cascades provenance, that's French, of interbed sediment is probably well established. You could look at each named interbed in the CRB stack and determine whether it contained Cascade grains, or just focus on the interbeds in the Grand Ronde. I think I'm doing that this spring with the 351 kids. Thank you for the idea, Sky. You need a map of Swanson's western edge of Grand Ronde flows. I think we have it. Who can you talk to about basalt-bearing conglomerates in the Puget Sound? Yeah, so we did get a hold of Andrew Sadowski. So some video interviews are coming in just a second, some clips. Very good. In fact, we're doing it right now. So part of the reason I want to keep the pace going is it takes a long time to show each of these video clips. These aren't slides. But I think it's important to hear from the people directly who I've been interviewing about this topic. USGS geologist Lydia Steisch, Washington Geological Survey geologist Andrew Sadowski, Montana geologist Sky Cooley are the three people I'm going to and listening to. And in the case of Sky's Zoom conversation, I've put myself a little bit more in because I really like bouncing ideas off of Sky, and he's very good and very quick. So you'll hear, I usually try to get myself out of these Zoom chats, but you'll hear a little bit more of me with these clips. Ready? Let's expand on what we've got established here at 8:37 a.m. Pacific time. Come on. Sorry. And Lydia's is helping us see that we've got all of these CRBs coming through at different times, different courses. The Columbia's got different pathways, even the Ginkgo flow cutting across and heading to Newport and everything else. But I've always been curious, are these flood basalts in southwestern Washington, are we sure those are flows that came up, basically flowed north, as opposed to, are any of these possibly coming cross country? And I don't know, do you think anybody's really looked at those flows carefully recently, or that's pretty open and shut case?
So it's a pretty good question. So there's two flows that really made it to Chehalis Basin the most, and one is one of the upper Grand Ronde flows. I think it's the Sentinel Bluffs formation or member. And so that one would have been during that very eruptive time of the Columbia River basalts. But the other one is the Pomona flow. It's from the Saddle Mountains. And that one is one of the ones where I showed that it was pretty channelized into the Columbia River Gorge. And so that one, I would say, is pretty good chance that that one flowed through the gorge and spread upwards. And so I think Occam's razor says, if that path was, simplest explanation makes the most sense, that if the Columbia River basalt group at Pomona time did that, then that would also explain why it did that in the Grand Ronde time too. But I will never say everything's possible. I would say anyone who's interested for looking for other routes should absolutely check it out, because I wouldn't say it's a totally closed book. There's always room for more research.
I like that open-ended ending to this, because yes, obviously I'm like hungry for a narrative and I love this idea, but I need to back off when it's clear. But I'm sorry, I'm going to do it one more time just before we say goodbye. We know we got the youngest of the, I think we're talking about the youngest of the Grand Ronde lava flows. I'll color them purple. If we've got the youngest of the Grand Ronde lava flows in the Rim Rock area, and we have the youngest of the Grand Ronde lava flows on Table Mountain and Mission Ridge, where they're doing skiing above Wenatchee. And even up here, we've got the youngest of the Grand Ronde flows, I think, and elevate, what are the elevations of each of these things? At Table Mountain, we're over 6,000 feet elevation. And then again, what's the northernmost part that we have these same youngest of the Grand Ronde flows over here? Are we then really saying that this is Occam's razor, that we want to get everybody down? I don't know. It's that kind of thing that it feels like it's worth spending a couple. Hey, Lydia was a good sport there. I forgot I included myself in that one too. Boy, I'm really full of myself. I like the back and forth, and I like to involve people who I'm not only wanting to listen to them. As I set these Zoom interviews up, I'm always clear, because many of them don't watch the letters here. I'm always clear that I want this to be a back and forth. I don't want this just to be you giving us a Zoom lecture. And they're like, oh, really? Oh, okay. So they know it's intentional, that I want them to stop their share so we can go back and forth. And in that case, I used purple, but you know I wasn't meaning younger than 10. I meant just Grand Ronde, because I needed another color. But I continue to try to be open, and many of the guests try to be open. And that Grand Ronde thing, that orange blanket continues. I can't get off of it. It's fun. Andrew Sadowski, same idea. Let's be open and just talk.
See the bottom of the Wapshilla Ridge north of Ellensburg.
If the Wapshilla was the monster of the monster, why wouldn't it be the one to cross the Cascades?
I mean, it is in the Columbia River Gorge also. So, I mean, this is kind of an argument to say that, maybe the Columbia River Gorge, or the Columbia River Gorge was probably, the conduit or
Yeah.
the pathway that was filled in by
Yeah.
the monsters. And then, only what's left kind of makes it up into the areas that I was showing on my screen.
But it's kind of the point you just said before I rudely had you stop your share. These early... Shut up. Okay, talking to myself. Andrew Sadowski, just down the hall. Major help. That full Zoom interview waits for you at the website. We were talking about the Wapshilla Ridge flow, which is the biggest of the big boys in the Grand Ronde. And so Andrew, after that Zoom, been thinking about that for the last couple of days, he texted me last night a photo from his house. And he's like, why don't you try this? I'm trying to say, this is Andrew Sadowski taking a photo in his kitchen sink. Thank you, Andrew, for burning a little extra calories here. He's like, these earlier flows, even some of the early Grand Ronde flows, like the Wapshilla flow, is erupting in eastern Washington. It's approaching the Cascades, but it's doing the hard work. It's filling these low valleys. It's only the younger Columbia River basalts. Maybe it's only the youngest of the Grand Ronde flows that are able to make it westward over these older flows that are filling the holes, essentially. Trey fills first with old CRB, 1 cup, 1 basin at a time. Thank you. Fun. Okay, more of me here, but I wanted to just kind of take a step in and share this with Sky. I'm not going to show it. I've already done it with you. Moving on. So Don Swanson saw the conversation with Sky Cooley where we're bouncing ideas back and forth, much of which you've already heard now. And Don Swanson, by email, just a couple weeks ago, said, I enjoyed your discussion with Sky Cooley. I don't have much to add. I can second the thought that some Grand Ronde could have reached farther west than its current margin. That margin, as I put it in my 1967 paper, could have been more like an archipelago of islands rather than a continuous coastline. Some basalt flows could have slipped between islands and reached west. We've just said this earlier, but I want to just have Don craft it himself. I do think, though, that there could have been a general highland that restrained Grand Ronde from traveling far westward. The irregular thickness of the basalt that I mapped show an unhappy, irregular topography not conducive to widespread inundation. In other words, that's a vote for orange worms instead of an orange blanket, and even those orange worms are not going to get all the way to I-5, in Don's view. And current directions are mostly south, though I did measure some toward the southeast, as I recall. It's just he casually recalls from 50 years ago, almost 60 years ago. Taken together, the provenance, that's French, and current directions might suggest a topography a little higher to the west that constrained rivers into the south direction. That would have kept the basalt from moving farther westward, except perhaps locally. As you and Sky noted, the failure to find Grand Ronde flows west of today's crest argues that the flows never reached there. Erosion is, of course, the big unknown. And I, Don Swanson, would not be surprised if some Grand Ronde lava might eventually show up in unexpected places. For now, though, I still think that a general high area west of the current Grand Ronde margin kept the flows from moving westward very much farther. Don. Thank you, Don. Okay, Sky Cooley then emphasizes something I think I don't still totally understand, or maybe don't get the significance of. There's a difference between the topographic crest of the Cascades today and the drainage divide, which I guess both of these are current, Sky. I know Sky's in the live chat. This is both current? Is that why the Yakima Valley Glacier crossed Snoqualmie Pass? Because it's coming from a true divide? I don't get it. But anyway, that issue is coming up now because I keep talking about crossing the crest of the Cascades, but maybe I should be saying crossing the divide. Or is this Don Swanson's divide? Whatever. But Sky gives us something specific out of the blue for me that many of the viewers since this interview have been hot on. Sky. Truly from the east, like geochemically, I guess would be the only way to tell the difference. I don't know.
What about still in the Cascades? What if you don't?
What about still in?
West?
What
Okay,
about
so
still in the
there's
Cascades?
that Steamboat Mountain, right? There's supposedly CRBs between Mount St. Helens and Mount Adams.
Okay.
There's a peak up there called, it's not really much of a peak, but it's kind of something called Steamboat Mountain. Do you know anything about that?
No.
Okay, well, look into that. That's something that I've come across. I don't really know a whole
You're
lot
saying
about that.
is possibly there's basalt in Steamboat Mountain that might be some of this,
CRBs, yeah.
like what we're talking about is that everybody agrees the CRBs don't have any, the elevation, if we can find a flow top in one of the Grand Rondes here, Steamboat Mountain, we are now building toward a secret document. Not secret on purpose, but a document that I'm sure none of you have seen or heard or read from Paul Hammond. So Sky's the guy who said, well, you should look into Steamboat Mountain. And afterwards, I emailed Sky and said, how'd you know about Steamboat Mountain? He says, I just Googled and found Steamboat Mountain. So Andy Miner, 15 years ago, knew about Steamboat Mountain and was starting to zoom around on Google Earth back in 2013. And here's Steamboat Mountain, and it's some exposed. Sure enough, it's Grand Ronde lava. It's some of the younger flows in the Grand Ronde lava that's between Mount Adams and Mount St. Helens. And here's an example, therefore, of some of our brown lava that's up in the Cascades. It's one of the few remnants that remains. So with the sketch, where I'm saying, well, we just don't have any CRB up in the mountains like that. We uplift, it intensifies the erosion. There's nothing left from that former orange blanket. Well, there are two little scraps that I didn't know about, and most everybody doesn't know about, but a few people have known about it. Andy Miner's showing us his little Google Earth images. Many of the viewers started sending stuff. Sky Cooley started emailing stuff. He made a little diagram with his crest versus drainage divide thing again, but also showing us that here's one little scrap of brown CRB up high in the mountains. It's not like, towering above everything, but it's up there. It's not in the gorge. It's up there. Other viewers, I'm sorry, forgot who sent this. Like, well, yeah, you can drive right to it. The Pacific Crest Trail is coming right by this thing called Steamboat Mountain. This is State Forest Service Route 88, PCT Trailhead. So I guess the Pacific Crest Trail crosses a Forest Service road right there. You can go up Chisel Road and take a hike up at Steamboat Mountain, Big Mosquito Lake. That sounds enticing. And so now we get to the secret document. So Darrell Gussie has made a brief appearance here. He's a longtime Forest Service geologist, a close collaborator of Paul Hammond in Hammond Land. I'm not calling it Gussie Land, but I guess I could because Darrell Gussie has done a lot of work there. And this guy, John Lasher, is a name that comes up every once in a while. I started something called the Ice Age Floods Institute Ellensburg chapter with Tom Foster and Carl Loquist in 2007. And all we wanted to do was have some geology talks on this campus and do some weekend field trips for free. 2007, before I did any of the YouTube stuff or anything. And one of the first people to express interest, and he was at every talk and every field trip that we did, was a heavy machinery operator, John Lasher, who lives in Ellensburg. And Lasher has been intensely interested in geology ever since. In fact, Lasher said, I'm about ready to retire from my running heavy machinery, and I'm thinking about going back to school. And I said, I don't know, John, I don't know if it's worth it to take all these classes and get a degree. He's like, well, do I have another option? And I said, well, you could just email some of these geologists and see if they need any volunteer help. Like, make your truck available or help with whatever. And that's what he's done. John Lasher, retired guy, just started connecting with Paul Hammond, started connecting with Daryl Gussie, started connecting with Brian Sherrod and a number of other geologists. And so Lasher has been watching the series. Thank you, John. And Lasher said by email, I just found this old Paul Hammond document. I don't have a digital version of it. It's just a few pieces of paper. Can I just drop them off at your office? I said, put them in my mailbox. Thank you, John. I'll take a look. Let's read it together. You do not have this. All I have is this piece of paper. Like, here it is. Let's read it together quickly. It's a draft. I don't think it was ever published by Paul Hammond, with 3 different working titles. A possible channel of Grand Ronde basalt lava across the southern Washington Cascades, or J. Hoover Mackin and the covering of the Columbia River basalt across southwestern Washington, evidence for a channel of such basalt in the Cascade. Too wordy. Or, preferred title, J. Hoover Mackin's covering of Columbia River basalt in southwestern Washington, evidence for another channel of basalt across the Cascade Range. Okay, Paul. Abstract. Again, I don't think this was ever published. Thank you, John Lasher, for the peek here at a secret document. 2 isolated occurrences of CRB lie midway between volcanoes Mount St. Helens and Mount Adams in southwestern Washington Cascades. The larger occurrence is at Steamboat Mountain. The smaller is 6 kilometers southwest at Squaw Butte. Both localities lie along the southern margin of the Lewis River Valley. They provide little evidence that the lavas covered the region before uplift of the range as expressed by Mackin, but do indicate that in addition to the Columbia River, other river courses, orange gummy worms, possibly channelized basalt lavas into the southwestern Washington area before uplift of the Cascade Range. The larger outcrop at Steamboat was discovered by Howard Gower in his 1958 reconnaissance mapping of the region, but never published. The occurrences are now shown in the 2005 map by Eric Schuster. Both are composed of ortly and umptanum members of the low magnesium N2 Grand Ronde basalts. At least 3 flows compose the ortly member and only 1 flow in the upper umptanum member. The flows range in thickness from 15 to 245 meters and cover areas of 15 square kilometers at Steamboat Mountain and much smaller at Squaw Butte. Introduction. Before uplift of the Cascades, lava plain, Mackin, and Carey. And then they quote from that diagram. We've already read that. Mackin also expressed this viewpoint in lectures to geology classes at the UW, but the interpretation was rarely accepted by the graduate students and not by the faculty at the University of Washington. Yet in my ramblings, I don't know which document that is, in the South Cascades, I came upon occurrences of the lava flows in the middle of the range, midway between St. Helens and Adams in the Steamboat. I guess that's what Sky Cooley found by Googling, along the southern margin of the Lewis River, causing me to rethink that maybe Mackin could have been right. But on second thought, possibly these lavas are partial fillings in valleys that extended east to the Columbia Plateau or to the west, conveying lava to the southwestern Washington. Most CRBs are interpreted to have descended the ancestral Columbia River. Possibly some basalts descended other valleys, such as that of the ancestral Lewis River. Then there's more detail here. I'll let you freeze frame if you want to really read this detail about the geology in the measurements of the brown lavas at Steamboat and Squaw Butte. More detail. Chemistry, I'll let you freeze frame this one too. Ages of both lava flows are between 15 point. Okay, these are old dates. Indian Heavens nearby. Conclusion. Without the finding of additional occurrences of CRBs in the South Cascades, it's unlikely that the isolated occurrences in Steamboat Mountain area justify interpreting that this area of the range was covered by an orange blanket. Or is it possible that erosion has removed a tremendous sheet of basaltic lava in the last 1 million years? The occurrences described herein do indicate that the flows advanced some distance westward into now what is the range. In these localities, up to 25 kilometers from the western margin of the CRBs, along possibility the ancestral Lewis River. The river has probably been dislodged a short distance north by emplacement of an intrusion center that's younger. Okay, good. So, fun, right? Fun. A long-lost draft that you would think that I found 3 weeks ago, and I've been building these 2 lectures based on that, but not true. It's just a happy accident. And after we kind of got there on our own, here we find this thing from Hammond. Wonderful. Okay, I think I'm almost done with the crossing of the Cascades business, and then we turn our attention to the uplift. I think I'm okay with the pace of this. Hope you are too. You okay? I hope you are too. The Ginkgo flow is younger than the Grand Ronde, but it sits directly and is nested right on top of Columbia River sands of the vantage sediment. This is near Bickleton, Washington. But I'm revisiting this from the last episode because this is accepted by everyone. That even though today, I thought I had that. Even though today there is no orange basalt, this is the Coast Range, right? These are the Cascades. This is the Coast Range. And everyone agrees that the Ginkgo flow that's at Newport, Oregon, and Yaquina Head that I showed you in the Oregon Public Broadcasting video, everybody agrees that was once connected with the rest of the Ginkgo. Like, nobody's saying this thing went down the coast like this. So if this was an orange gummy worm that has then been uplifted in the Coast Range and removed by erosion, why can't we do the same thing up here with the older Grand Rondes? Because when we get younger than the Grand Rondes, when we get younger than the main event in the German chocolate cake, we do have these old river valleys that are filled with lava. Look at these. Look at these individual Wanapum and Saddle Mountain flows that are younger than Grand Ronde, and they are just simply being confined mostly to these old river valleys. There's orange worms everywhere, is my point. Younger in the cake. But here, we go back one more time. Let's look at that and realize that today there is no connection. So all I'm trying to say is that this Coast Range of Oregon is a kind of microcosm of something that we're doing much more broadly up here in an older time on a larger scale. And one of the places that we were just thinking about is connecting the Grand Ronde lavas in southwestern Washington with the same exact Grand Ronde lavas over in Hammond Land. Yes. So Tom from Maple Valley says, Nick, as far as I can see, it's only up the Natchez River. As far as I can see, it's only up the Little Natchez River that the R2 Grand Ronde crops out beyond the last N2 Grand Ronde. Have you ever driven over Natchez Pass? No, I haven't. It's the oldest wagon road across the Cascades, and although it's Forest Service road reaching almost 5,000 feet elevation, it's still pretty well maintained, and I think old Whitey can handle it. It crosses from Little Natchez over to Greenwater and cuts through some impressive Ohanapikosh and Fifes Peak along the way. Tom, thanks for the tip. I'm going to do that this summer. So here's from the Washington Geological Survey, And here's 410, here's Whistling Jacks, and then heading towards Chinook. But I rarely, if at all, go up the Little Natchez River. And Tom says this is a worthwhile drive, and we have an orange gummy worm heading up this old valley. From Sky Cooley saying, don't forget now that the Yakima Fold Belt, which is so well known, and the faults and the reverse faults of east of the Cascades have been connected through the Cascades, and there's similar structures in western Washington. So if we have a continuation of the folds and faults of the Yakima Fold Belt, is it that outlandish to say that we had orange worms also once upon a time before the Cascades high uplift? Is it that crazy to say we had orange worms connecting between east and west? Let's talk to somebody who's done some detailed mapping, both west and east of the basalts, and bonus points for doing mapping with these upper Grand Ronde lavas, both east and west. Does anybody like that exist? Yeah. He works just down the hall. Or something like that, crossing the Cascades when the Cascades were low, and somehow connecting between the Grand Ronde lavas near Yakima and the Grand Ronde lavas that you just mapped in Centralia. It's not crazy to say that, sounds like. You were thinking that.
Yeah, I mean, like if I could share my screen again,
Please, let's do it. Yeah, I mean, it's fun to talk to somebody who knows the detail of some of these flows on both sides of the Cascades, and pretty much everybody is saying, besides Steamboat Mountain and a couple other small things, there's nothing there. But this is fun to talk to somebody who's seen these things in place on both sides of the Cascades. Go for it, Andrew.
Yeah, so those two map areas are right over here. So
Great.
Corridor,
Yeah.
Centralia, Adna, and I was kind of imagining maybe there's some channel corridor in here.
Yes.
And the place to maybe look for that would be in this area, because these kind of QAPO units that are labeled here, these are Quaternary alpine glacial outwash deposits. So these cover the Miocene rocks. The Jackson Prairie natural gas storage facility is kind of around here too, and they have a lot of deep wells. And so yesterday I kind of looked through some of the well data hoping to find some CRBs there, and I didn't. Like this first 100 feet is what they call like basin fill, and then they get into the Lincoln Creek and Skookumchuck. So, you know, maybe you could argue, oh, okay, in those first 500 feet, maybe they hit a little thin bit of basalt and didn't bother recording it. Or if it's really channelized, you know, it's kind of like hitting a dartboard, and they would have had to hit the well just right to get that subsurface basalt. All these polygons here are CRBs that are outlined. And
wow.
So like the two areas that I was kind of talking about were like over here, and this CRB actually strings along in the footwall of the Doty Fault over here before taking a pretty sharp bend. There's a CRB over here also that's far younger. So this is the Pomona flow that Lydia was talking about.
Oh yeah.
All, you know, there's other CRBs here. And what I've highlighted is the N2 of the Grand Ronde, so the youngest part of the Grand Ronde, I should say. And then one last thing, and I'll kind of throw it back to you.
Yeah.
One of the things that I learned in the last, few years, working with the CRBs out east, is that I took another look at the chemistry that I had collected those first couple of years, and other people have collected the first couple of years, to see exactly what flows are there. On the east side where we are now, there's a whole set of package of flows that it's
right.
pretty thick, and you can map them out, you can use the chemistry, etc. What we're seeing over here is really like only one type of chemistry of the flows in the Grand Ronde, which is the McCoy Canyon, which is like a subset of the Sentinel Bluffs. And I won't through too much jargon, at you, but like Sentinel Bluffs is like, kind of thick, maybe like 500 feet-ish thick. The McCoy is probably like, a fraction of that.
Thank you, Andrew. If you want all that detail, Andrew's a detail guy. He's a mapper. He knows his stuff. He continues to make maps of the Columbia River basalts on the eastern side of the Cascades, and that full Zoom interview is waiting for you. Everybody's been watching these episodes, including people that you remember from the past alphabets. Look who showed up in my inbox a few days ago. Jerome Lessman, Vancouver Island University. Jerome's now thinking about some of this stuff. Let me read it quickly. Nick, you got me wondering about through valleys to the coast, through the Cascades in Washington and British Columbia. Just some spitball ideas for which you may be way further along in your thinking. I'm squinting through valleys into existence on the following basis. Modern-day near connections across the Cascade Divide. For many, the near connection seems to be limited by one of the big volcanoes and or some local low-relief surfaces, volcaniclastic/lava, near the Cascade Divide that show different erosional patterns than the fluvial glacial trough shape. Broad low-relief valley sections that extend close to the divide and don't show a consistent tapering of valley width, depth toward the higher elevations. A general east-west trend, but that's really loose, so I'd say plus minus 150 degrees from that trend. Candidates? How about the Kittitas-Teanaway-Snoqualmie North Bend corridor, aka the I-90 corridor, by the way, especially I-90 between Easton and Snoqualmie, stretch with 3 huge lakes, also a parallel wide valley that could connect. How about US 12, Packwood to Goose Prairie, huge piles of volcanics, I think, northeast end, but may be younger, so fills an existing valley? How about US 2? By the way, all these have major highways in them. How about US 2, Leavenworth to Skykomish? Might be a bit of a stretch, but depending when uplift and intrusions occur, could give appearance of truncated valley system near the divide. And hell, while we're at it, how about Lake Chelan to Concrete? Not a big highway there. Thanks, Jerome, who, of course, and I say of course because he was a major open question guy last winter, he loves thinking big and creatively. And many geologists that I've been interacting with, if I goose them a little bit, they're willing to think big and broad. They feel safe somehow to do that with me. And those that refuse, I don't have them join us. Speaking of big and broad and open, Jason McClowery, remember him? He made an appearance on Zoom last month. Jason lives in Baker City, Oregon. Nick, I guess I've worked on this topic quite a bit, mapping Columbia River basalt lavas where it crosses the northern Oregon Arc at Hood River and Mount Hood. There, most of the Grand Ronde covered a fairly extensive area south of the latitude of Mount Hood. And south of Hood River, around the community of Mount Hood, brown lavas of the Grand Ronde sit directly on some older Cascade andesites only exposed in the footwall of the Hood River Fault and east margin of the Hood River Graben. I dated these at 28, so we're back in green time now. And they are the oldest exposed rocks in this part of the northern Oregon Cascades. At Cascade Locks, in the heart of the Columbia River Gorge, Grand Ronde, Bentley used to call them ground round. Sometimes I slip. Ground round lavas sits on the latest Oligocene, early Miocene Eagle Creek Formation. I think that's red. Younger brown lavas were most influenced by some deep canyons and Yakima fold structures that controlled their distribution across this part of Oregon. For example, Priest Rapids, which is younger than Ground Round, coming through Hood River, ultimately filled a paleochannel, in other words, an orange gummy worm, on the order of 150 meters. Saddle Mountain's flows were even more channel confined. Also of interest during this brown time, further south in Oregon, would be the eruption of some rhyolites in the Menagerie Wilderness. It's one of the few examples in the Oregon Cascades that I know of where we have rhyolites 16.2 million years old that are happening at the same time as the CRBs. I don't think we're going there necessarily. We're almost out of letters, but the part where the Cascades are still erupting something, at the same time we're trying to cross these orange blankets. I'm interested in that. The Cascades aren't quiet during the flood basalt time, I don't think. And Jason just gives us an example in Southern Oregon where that exactly is happening. Thank you, Jason McClowery from Oregon. All right, the rest of today, okay, I'm taking off. Thank you for the gift. We're done with brown. Okay? It's purple the rest of the way. We've made it. It's purple the rest of the way. 3 and a fraction letters left in the alphabet, purple all the way. And what's purple? You know what purple is. Purple is younger than 10 million years ago. Let's think about Uplift now, the rest of our time. David, by email, since the last episode. Nick, very cool about Mike Eddy's track career. I would have seen him run in college a couple of times. My son was a track and field athlete, triple jump mostly, at Brown, at the same time Mike was running. I went to a couple of HEPs, the Ivy League Championship meets, one indoor and one outdoor, which was at Princeton. The one program I have saved from the indoor meet has Mike in it. He was really good. A 46-second 400 is smoking. Also, I love the way you've been taking this cross Cascades CRB story to see where it goes. But what I really want to know is, what caused the frickin' Cascades Uplift? Thank you, David. I got the same question. We're not going to be satisfied today, but I can share a few resources that are snapshots of what you have waiting for you in the form of science papers at the website. But we're not going to have a nice, satisfying conclusion to this episode today by giving you a one number and one tectonic or other reason for uplifting the Cascades, even though it's a super obvious question, David. I agree. Back to Mackin, Uplift of the Cascade Range, written in 1947. It's easy to bend a telephone book into an arch, but it's very difficult to produce a simple arch in corrugated cardboard in which the corrugations run at an angle to the trend of the arching. The uparching of the Cascades is a mechanical problem of the latter type. Remember, he wrote this before plate tectonics, in which the corrugations are folded structures in older sediments, locally stiffened by irregular masses of granite. So, whereas the Cascade Range is in a very general way a north-south belt of crustal uplift and volcanism extending from Northern California to Canada, it is everywhere complicated in detail by fractures and bucklings in many directions. The period of time during which the Cascades were upraised is approximately 6 million years, of which about 4.5 million are usually assigned to the Pliocene and about 2 million to the Pleistocene. We have a reasonably clear picture of altitudes and relief before the range began to grow, early in the Pliocene. As we know, of course, the height and form of the present range, but there are few definite data as to the rates of uplift in the meantime, as to the constantly changing succession of landscapes. What we do know is based very largely on existing landforms rather than on rocks. Many of the valleys on the flanks of the range in Oregon and Washington. What am I doing? Why don't I go to the modern research? I think it's important to show how far we've come, even though we haven't gotten very far. That's ultimately what I'm saying. I'm reading stuff from 1947, and I don't know how much further we are along in answering rather basic questions about the uplift of the Cascades. Let's continue with Jay Hoover. But by scrambling up the valley sides of the climber, man, I'm having trouble reading this morning. Come on, slow down. Many of the valleys of the flanks of the Cascade Range in Oregon and Washington are steep-sided gorges with scarcely room for railroad or highway on the valley bottoms. But by scrambling up the valley sides, the climber commonly may be rewarded by seeing another valley, widely opened in rounded hills that grade up to the interstream ridges of moderate to high relief. This sounds like south of Ellensburg, by the way. Here are two distinct generations of topography. A broadly opened surface developed during a period when the stream was cutting downward very slowly or not at all, and a narrow inner gorge produced by greatly accelerated stream cutting. The general effect is that of an enormous golf course, trenched in all the low places by deep gullies. The grass on this scale model is the Cascade Forest. Something like this, that we have, according to J. Hoover Mackin, a broad open scene and then a deeply incised cut inset into it. This broad rolling golf course and then these steep gullies cut into it. I think we're still realizing that there are two major periods of uplift. And are these two major uplift incision events tied specifically to the Cascades or not? Like, this is usually talked about in the neighborhood of the Yakima fold and thrust belt and the clockwise rotation. It's not normally thought of, I don't think, as being tied to Cascade uplift, but maybe it should be. These are stunning places just south of Ellensburg. I'm taking Geology 101 kids right here, and it's going to look about like this with snow on Tuesday morning. Is this an uplift story tied to the Cascades more than the Yakima fold belt? Or more the fold belt and not the Cascades? Or should I think of both of them equally? I've showed stuff like this for years, and it's been so removed from the Cascades, is what I'm saying. This uplift intensifying erosion, this sudden digging of these rivers, I thought maybe this winter we would have someone say, well, yeah, this is not just a Yakima fold belt thing. This is mostly a Cascade uplift thing that's causing these rivers to dig. I'm not sure. Jordan Carey's with us, everybody. Wow, in the live chat from his home in his PJs. So you see what I mean? This is Ellensburg, this is Yakima, this is Hammondland, this is the Goat Rocks where we're headed the next few episodes. I'm struggling right now, in a good way, I guess. I'm struggling trying to explore and open my mind to have this uplift business and this uplift business. I don't think anybody really has it figured out. What's the connection? Is it a total, okay, spitballing now. Is everything one story? And when we uplift the Cascades, we're also uplifting all these things? Come on, man. As we're going to see in just a second before we quit, we're going to have some folks weighing in on uplifting in the Cascades, including Lydia Stice, who says we're not going to do a whole lot of uplift until 3 million years is when we're going to start uplifting. If I'm being greedy now, I want everything in this picture, I want everything in this frame to be incised younger than 3. Selfishly, that's what I want. We'll see what these folks say. But it would be nice and elegant to have one story about everything digging because everything's lifting. Cascades are lifting and the Yakima Canyon business is lifting, like Menashtash Ridge is lifting, all the way back to Hell's Canyon. I want everything going up with response, but I don't think we can do it that simply. Yeah, this is the old stuff. This is the cascade. This is the clockwise rotation. Blah, blah, blah. We're not going to do it again. Come on, man. We're not going to do it again. And I'm sorry, Jay Hoover. We're not going to your numbers here. They're probably good. People can read them on their own. But let's go to some folks who have some stories to tell. Everybody says this incision is younger than 15 because the uplift is younger than 15 to go from low to high Cascades.
Been, if the Cascades is thought of as sort of an arch, on the east side, the basalts are tilted. So we know the arch is younger than the basalts, right? We know that. Are there remnants of basalt all the way at the peaks? Like on Mount Moran, you have this beautiful, in the Tetons, you have this beautiful skiff of flathead sandstone on the top of this basement rock. No, we don't have those basaltic remnants all the way across the Cascades, but maybe there's other evidence that people could use.
Okay, so I'm going to read basically stuff that you just said, but I want to read it from 50, 60, 70 years ago. And viewers, before I do that, before we lose you here, all through this winter, we've been saying, well, it's green Ohanapakash. We're down at sea level, okay? It's red time now, these next couple of shows. Paul Hammond and all the Fife's Peak stuff, I think we're still pretty low. Now we're 26. We're approaching 17 million years ago, which is this brown time. It's called brown for a reason. The brown basalts of eastern Washington are coming towards the Cascades. We're still fricking low because, as you heard earlier in this conversation, nobody, is that right, Sky? Nobody's saying there's massive uplift in the Cascades younger than 12. I just want to say that one more time. Like, nobody's saying there's a major mountain range earlier than these flood basalts.
No, certainly not 15. I mean, if you want to put an absolute, nobody says it's not older than 15. Yeah.
And here's why they're saying that, viewers. So let's go. Why the hell did I include that clip? We already know that. All right. Here's some detail from Sky Cooley, featured in his Zoom talk. There's all sorts of past studies on the uplift of the Cascades to go from low to high Cascades. Plant fossils, paleosols, exhumation rates, calcretes, teeth, geomorphology. And here are the ranges of possibilities. To go from low to high Cascades, everybody's weighing in with a different number. This was created specifically for us by Sky, I think. And Sky, no offense, I cut it and reorganized it so that it works for our low to high, our old to young. These are your colors that you stamped down, but I want it to be put like this. Let's let down and look at this. So Sky Cooley, after doing all this reading with all this past work, including his own work on calcretes, low relief divide, low summits in the Cascades, low mountain passes, no barrier, low mean elevation, roughly 10 million years ago. 10, we're done with the flood basalts now. Symmetrical erosion, no soil carbonates, warm, wet climate, weather systems unimpeded by topography, high erosion rates across the Cascade Range. Summit heights remain low. We're still low Cascades here. Everybody agrees. Sediment shed to basins east and west. Range crossing valleys. Range crossing valleys. We've been flirting with that concept. If we have a range crossing valley, like a river valley crossing through the Cascades, I'm not talking about the Columbia now. Which other rivers had a different course 10 million years ago and went through the Cascades when the Cascades were low? Where was that? Jerome Lessman says, could it be between Ellensburg and Seattle? Could it be between Yakima and Chehalis? Could it be between Lake Chelan and whatever he said over there, Cedro Woolley? Back to Sky. Sky likes the number 7. If he's forced to pick one number, he likes the number 7. For pressing the button and starting the uplift. Dissected and discontinuous divide, high summits, low passes, partial barrier. West side versus east side, weak rain shadow. We start to get some calcretes, cooler, drier climate, rising topography, begins to block weather, moderate erosion to the west, lower to the east, sediment shed to basins east and west, deep range cross. Oh, he still wants range. Sky, you still want a river crossing through here. Interesting. But then by 4, Sky Cooley, weighing in, says, okay, we finally have the high Cascades by 4 in my worldview. We got a strong barrier now. We have a strong rain shadow. We have thick calcretes, which form only when you have a dry climate. Colder, wetter. Oh, toss in the Ice Age as well. Why not? Volcanic cone building. Glacial buzzsaw at upper elevations. Erosion high west and central. Low to the east. Topographic rise of the Cascades. Strong rain shadow. Few. You're still not giving up on these rivers crossing. Interesting. fewer range-crossing valleys, vigorous calcium. Okay, we got it. What kind of evidence weighs in to your stance and other people's weighing in on this? Let's hear from Sky directly with an overview of the different kinds of work that have tried to lay into this concept. And Sky's defending himself in the live chat.
Okay.
Very good. So you're coming at this from an angle of thickness of calcretes in eastern Washington. That seems to be a new approach to back up this chorus of people who are saying rain shadow establishing younger than 10 million years ago, let's say. And to confirm what I think you taught us all over the last 3-4 years, you need a real arid environment to get those calcretes. You can't get the calcretes if you have a low Cascades. What are some of the other, just off the top of your head, you've been doing a lot of reading about this over the years, what are other approaches that geologists have been using to propose this idea of an uplift of the Cascades younger than 10 million years?
Well, there's several. Matt Cohn at Boise State does isotope geochemistry, and he I'm not sure where they found it, but it was an ungulate tooth that they found buried in a Paleosol sequence, and they cut it open, did their chemistry on it, and were able to figure out that that animal was eating plants that correspond with a certain climate, and that climate was a dry climate. And so knowing the age of the strata they were working on, knowing the chemistry of the tooth, they were able to make the leap that just says the Cascades were risen by the time this tooth fell out of that animal's head. Others in similar ways, people use groundwater chemistry, compare it to a standard, and then can make some leaps towards burial and depth and heating and make some other leaps. It's a little dry, but chemistry gets you a long way, and isotopes of oxygen and carbon get you a long way in this story. They essentially give you paleoclimate. So you've got paleobotany as well, which has been around a long time, and a lot of people sort of pre-World War II and then through the mid-century, a lot of people were finding, if you look at the Vantage interbed, you were in a warm, wet environment in the Miocene. But as you move into the Ringgold and the Pliocene, you're starting to pick up the change between, savanna type botany, plant community into a dryland community. And so that shift is recorded sometime in the Ringgold around 5 million years. Fossils of animals is another one that people have used. Gustafson and Smith and a lot of other people in the Ringgold especially have, defined the animal community that way. There's others, geomorphology, Eric Cheney, structural geology, cross-cutting relationships, sort of.
Sky Cooley. He's not defending himself. He's just making sure to give credit where credit is due. Nice. And Jordan Carey's loving the episode. Thank you, Jordan. It's this kind of stuff that really turns me on. And you can enlarge this and really dig in. This is a poster made by Sky Cooley 4 years ago now. And he's plotting graphically all these different kinds of evidence. I love this. I love this kind of thing. And in gray here is his time window. Looks like roughly between 6 million years ago and 2.6 million years ago, where a lot of these different kinds of evidence are all pointing to arrival of the Cascades rain shadow, which from the start of today's episode, once we start the rain shadow, that means we're jacking the low Cascades up to the high Cascades. So enjoy this poster, whatever it is. I don't think I don't know, Sky, did you present it somewhere? Regardless, it's a PDF you sent to me, and I have it waiting for you, viewers. I can't stop. I normally stop about right here, but I do not want to have this spill into the next dose. So the baby can wait in Bellingham, all right? We're in this. Let's go. Keep going. Sky, by email. Any Miocene basalt that's present in Puget Sound would be cool. Even better if CRB provenant, that's French. No one has posited it would be this thick. Channelized is how I understand it too. Okay, we're past that stuff. Cascade arch idea is supported by tilt on east side basalts, maybe west side strata too. South plunging arch concept consistent with more erosion north of Snoqualmie Pass. If the Cascade Range did not rise along north-south faults, does buoyancy provided by felsic intrusives do all the work? Does the spine of the range result from ascending subduction zone melts or east-west compression? I would love to go in this direction and do a whole nother letter on it. I just don't think the work is there. Did you hear what Sky just asked, wondering out loud? Are we jacking up to make high cascades because of some major tectonic thing? Or some sort of flare-up of the magma? Or something else tied to those two concepts? Yakima Fold Belt has two-phase uplift history, Miocene and Pleistocene. Cascade Range may too. While the deformation style differs between ridges and range, but same plate compression appears to drive both. Reporting from the Les Schwab in Ronan, Montana, Sky Cooley. If nothing else, you get the sense of who's deeply into this stuff and loves to think and share ideas, creative and otherwise. And those are the geologists I am gravitated toward. Terrible grammar. I like people like Sky Cooley. They're always thinking about this stuff. And I don't like the geologists who just do a day job, barely work, and don't have anything interesting or creative to say. Otherwise, I have no strong feelings on the matter. Eric Cheney, longtime University of Washington professor. These are my colors. These are our colors that I put on this morning, separating major regional unconformities. In geology, this little squiggle pattern means we've got a chewed off part of the stratigraphic column where a bunch of time has gone by and there aren't any rocks to look at. And Eric Cheney's main contribution on this matter is he thinks he can find 1, 2, 3, 4 region-wide unconformities going from the Pacific Ocean all the way back to damn near Idaho. And if we can follow these unconformities through the whole region, then these uplift stories maybe are more regional than people realize. We finish in the home stretch with little snippets here and there. Here's Andrew Sadowski combining forces with Lydia Steisch. Now you know both of them. And they're focusing on the timing of this very mysterious feature known as the Hog Ranch Nanum anticline between Ellensburg and Frenchman Coulee. This is still a major question mark what this north-south ridge tells us. There's a poster that image was coming from. Here's Lydia going back to the Columbia River Gorge and showing us evidence for a very young, a very late beginning of the Cascade Range uplift, at least in southern Washington.
Or uplift on that Saddle Mountains basalt flow, but not a ton more, suggesting that a lot of this uplift, a lot of this arching that we see in the Columbia River Gorge portion of the Cascades happened since 3 million years.
Okay,
That's
hang on.
a lot of uplift.
Hang on. Can you stop your share for just a second? This is a big
Yeah.
This is a big moment, Lydia. I need to see you now. This is big. I'm processing this in real time, but I think what I'm hearing from that diagram, what I'm seeing from that diagram, this is almost radical, isn't it? That you've got 3 million year old lava flows coming through the Columbia Gorge roughly, and they're horizontal. They're flowing.
So the 3 million, yeah. So not almost. So they're erupting really close to the crest of the Cascades in Oregon mostly, and then they started going into Washington about 2 to 1 billion years ago. but they're erupting locally, and they're coming down the tributaries that lead into
Oh.
the Columbia River. But so they're not flowing down the Columbia River Gorge the same way that the Columbia River basalts did, but we can
Okay.
tie them to the Columbia River still. Even so, they're a little bit more local. They're not flowing down the whole river
Okay.
system,
Okay.
but we can still relate them to the river level because the bases are hyaloclastic.
Got it. So
Yeah.
the reason I think this is big, and I think it's still why you're saying it's big, is that you're a young uplift person. You're a
Apparently.
you're not to label you, but you're a 3 million years or even slightly younger than 3 million years ago that we do
Yeah.
a lion's share of the uplift of the Cascades. Am I hearing that correctly?
Yeah, and so I have some values to share. So
Oh
the
God. Yeah.
good.
That full interview waits for you. We're going to keep moving on. I need to keep pushing ahead. I still have good stuff waiting for you. And I think this is now, from Lydia and Andrew, going to be tied more to the Ellensburg Formation, which, again, I'm saving until this spring with Geology 351. We'll be out in the field every Thursday afternoon, the students and I, and probably Jordan Carey, looking at some of these spots. But here's how we tie some of this stuff together. Here's the entire Columbia Basin, with the Yakima River and the Columbia and some other rivers coming in. Now we're back to the Hells Canyon stuff I was deeply into 6 years ago. But the idea is, as we start the uplift of this ridge between Ellensburg and Vantage, it isolates the Kittitas Valley from everybody else. And here's that number 3 coming from Lydia, where we accelerate, maybe even start the massive uplift in the Cascades. In the Cascades. And how does that Cascade uplift influence what's going on out in Disneyland here in Eastern Washington? Now it's just scraps of stuff to finish the episode. This is from a different paper waiting for you. I can't remember the author's name. It's a brand new paper, and they're making a case for magma transport and storage, creating the Cascade Arc that we've been talking about, younger than brown, sometime in purple, but we're doing it not on major faults. We're not making a mountain range in the classic sense. Like you go to the Rocky Mountains, you've got a big mountain range that uplifted in the Rockies, that's fine. Where are the big thrust faults and the other major structures and the anticlines and synclines and the erosional surface and all that? Are the Cascade Mountains a totally different animal? Where we're rising the Cascades not because we've changed something with the tectonic story and the plates. We haven't accelerated the plates. We haven't changed the direction of the plates. But it's just some sort of mysterious magma storm from below? How dumb is that? How radical is that? This is a paper, peer-reviewed paper. I think that's what they're saying, although I barely read the thing. And they're working with nick points in the Columbia River Gorge. This is kind of a combo between Lydia-type work, Jim O'Connor work, some of these magma dudettes, and our old friend Andrew Miner, holed up in Cle Elum, Washington, saying, Nick, I agree with Lydia and Sky that the notion that much or most of the uplift and incision of the Columbia Gorge is Ice Age, or at least Plio-Ice Age, and more canon, not hearsay. The present Columbia River Gorge was formed in post-Troutdale time by entrenchment of the Columbia River during rapid uplift of the Cascade Range during the past 1 to 2 million years. My take on these north-south uplifts, Coast Range, Cascades, Hog Ranch, is that because they are very long wavelength, they are similarly deep-seated and don't care about the state of stress in the upper crust. There's also some evidence that this is episodic, maybe due to changes in slab dip, including the arching of the slab below the north. Oh, here we go again. We're back to the slabs, everybody. Lydia did point out that just because uplift at the latitude of the Columbia Gorge was mostly young didn't mean that it couldn't have started much earlier to the north. And that is, in fact, maybe because the most convenient explanation of the range of proposed dates that Sky diagrammed. You don't have to limit yourself to one. But I want to. I want to just have one story. That's always my hope, is I can find some sort of grand, simple narrative that kind of floats above the fray. But even I'm not willing to do that in this case. There's too much detail to be addressed and responsible to. What? Well, everybody, we've made it. We're giving the Ellensburg Formation in between the basalt's short shrift. We're not getting into the Columbia River story, the changing of the rivers, Grandpa Carl. That's all coming this spring. All this stuff, all these incredible stories tied to the uplift in the Cascades, tied to the uplift, calderas, other things, uplifting Saddle Mountains. It's all coming down the road. Even video clips like this are coming in this spring. We got time for just a few live questions, and then I'm going to say goodbye to you and hit the road up and over the Cascade Range. It's time for some uppercase live question and answer. I think back in the backyard days, I think my original plan, somebody can correct me, but I was like, I want to do 30 minutes of a presentation and 30 minutes of questions. And I think we did that for quite a while. And then, of course, I couldn't keep my mouth shut. So then it was 45 minutes. And then it was an hour of me. But the live questions were always a major part. And this alphabet, at least, I've barely done questions. So oftentimes because I don't have much to say. Alberta Gary, you've previously filmed from Table Mountain north of Ellensburg, where the CRBs are uplifted and long way west. Could Table Mountain be a remnant of a Paleo-Kittitas Valley crossing the Cascades? I love it. Thank you. Every place that we have thick piles of Grand Ronde, can those simply be a remnant of a major river valley that used to go up and over? It can be that simple, Gary. Why not? Let's play with that. Joe Slick, what created the uplift? I tried to comment briefly, Joe. I don't have a good answer for you. Nobody does, I don't think. Kathy and Bob, based on the map of the Grand Ronde flows, it shows orange over much of the northern Oregon. Why did this not erode with the uplift of the Oregon Cascades? Most of these, I'll just read the questions. I'm purposely not involving Oregon for a number of reasons. One, there's too many stories down there to include in the alphabet. And there are two projects that I'm showcasing this winter. Have you forgotten? It's been a while since we've talked about them. Spirit Lake Pluton Project and Goat Rocks. We need the narratives in the South Cascades of Washington. So why don't we have similar stories and similar uplift stories in Oregon? I think there's a bunch of reasons for that. We just are not addressing it here today or this whole winter. Thank you. That guy up in the Yukon, is it possible that a change in the ratio of felsic to mafic magma changed with the growing number of volcanoes and underlying granites made the area more buoyant? Continental crust generation. I think that's where this new kind of work is coming from. The buoyancy and the loading of the crust and the thickening of the crust due to a flare-up, I guess. But your question is more informed than what I'm able to process at the moment. Kelly, does the ginkgo flow get into the timber without CRBs having been there first? Oh, I see. You're basically asking, is there a place where the ginkgo flow charted its own course and didn't merely follow the Grand Ronde ice cube tray business? It's a good question. Maybe that shortcut to Newport from Salem down to Live, 3 more. Yeah, there's some snow in the Cascades. I'm good, thank you. Jim, did the rate of subduction control the uplift? Did the development of the San Andreas push transform development change uplift rates? Thanks, Jim. That's a thread that I thought maybe we were going to follow and I just have lost. Remember we had changes in convergent rate between the subducting plate and the overriding plate? Is that part of this? I don't remember any plot where the convergence rate suddenly accelerated again. And I'm reminded that we had a story with the Chilliwack Rainbow with the Explorer plate breaking off. And I mean, some of these changes could truly go way back to the ocean plate stuff we were so worried about a month and a half ago. Yeah, interesting. Rex, why is there not an island of basalt that formed at the mouth of the Columbia where all that lava contacted the Pacific? Thank you, Rex. I just imagine it going out down the continental slope and not piling up. Who knows what sea level was like during that time? Why was the Farallon named? Okay, just the history of plate tectonics, Jerry. Pat, increasing clockwise rotation timing deserves more uplift. Why and when credit? All through this story today, in fact, all through most of the alphabet, we've had clockwise rotation. So it's this steady drumbeat of clockwise rotation happening during all of this. So I'm reluctant, Pat, to go to the clockwise rotation as a major story to explain some sudden change. And that's the way we'll finish. Cascade Uplift? Yeah, today we had Cascade Uplift. I think most everybody sees it as a dramatic and rather abrupt change from hardly any uplift, low cascades, to a very energetic uplift to make the high cascades. Whether you want to push that button at 7 million years ago, or at 4 million years ago, or 3 million years ago, or if you want to hit the button twice. I think that's what Bates and Sky and others were talking about. Yeah, hit the button and we got a little bit going on to make the open rolling golf course. And then we need to hit the red button, or the purple button, I guess, to really jack the thing up. To just have a steady clockwise rotation, which is recorded in the paleomag. The clockwise rotation is not accelerating and decelerating, I don't think. So why such an accelerated, energetic uplift at, let's take Lydia's number, 3 million years ago? That's a fun question. And whether we know why or not, I'm not sure is the point. I think it's just going out and driving like I'm about to do and looking at these places that are broad and open. And then as I get into the Cascades, I see these entrenched valleys and I'm like, God dang, that's Ice Age right there. That broad open valley is now, the floor has just dropped out of that thing. We've got this inner gorge. And we got the inner gorge because we got the incredible uplift to make the high cascades and to make the rain shadow effect. A toast to you. Here's to you for joining us today on Saturday morning, February 15th of 2025. Here's to all the geologists who have been good sports to participate with this episode by email, by Zoom interview, by being in the live chat, by watching in replay. You know who you are. Thank you. I'm pretty sure here's the plan for the rest of our time together. We have 3 letters left. Unless I have a major change of heart, here we are. Unless I have a major change of heart, this is going to be calderas in the Cascades. And these final 2 letters are going to be Goat Rocks volcanoes. Goat Rocks project. And I'll give you a sneak peek. Google Earth by Glenn, Lindsay Malone, Gary Paul, and Tom from Maple Valley are a 4-person team who have been working and toiling and emailing back and forth for the last few days and compiling all the caldera information they can find from the Washington Cascades. And I know very little of what they have found because I've asked them politely to just keep me out of it because I'm busy thinking about brown. But I'm done thinking about brown. I'm ready to think about purple. Lindsay Malone has purple hearts and goat icons going right now. Mr. Tony has goat icons and rocks. Goat rocks, goat rocks, goat rocks. And so I think Thursday's episode, when I see you next, Thursday at noon Pacific time, February 20th, I think it's mostly going to be stuff that group of 4 viewers have put together for us. And I'm very much looking forward to that. Thanks, everybody. I love you. And goodbye from Ellensburg, Washington, USA, home of Cascades A to Z live stream series on YouTube. See you on Thursday. Goodbye.